Do you ever wonder what God is going to do with your life? One day you may be working on a farm, then God calls you to lead a church. As a young boy, Alan Jackson watched his parents become followers of Jesus Christ and how God led them to start World Outreach Church in Middle Tennessee. In 1988, he became senior pastor and now leads one of the fastest growing churches in the United States. He and his wife Kathy are dedicated to helping people become fully devoted followers of Christ. This is his story of unshakable faith. This is today's life. Pastor Alan, it is such an honor and blessing to be here with you this morning at World Outreach Church in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Tell me a little bit how your church all started.
Okay, well, thank you, Terry, and it's wonderful to be with you. We are so grateful for your boldness. You are an ambassador for Jesus, and I have the highest respect for that, and you're grateful you can be here today. But, you know, people come to church today, it's a large church and lots of people, and they imagine it's always been that way. But I think the rest of the story is probably the most important part of the story, because it hasn't always been like this. I grew up in a Christian home. I have two brothers, and when we were small, my parents insisted that we go to church every week. It was not up for negotiation because I tried. But we weren't Christians. You know, we sat in church, but we weren't Christians. And my family faced a tragedy. My mom was diagnosed with cancer and told she had a few months to live. And we were church, but we didn't know the Lord. The pastor came to visit at the hospital and told my mom there was no heaven or hell. So we were really in a pretty desperate place. And they were flying to Mayo Clinic for surgery. And my mom prayed a prayer that if there was a God, because she said she wasn't sure, that before she died, she could know the truth. So she could tell her sons to be Jewish or Baptist or Catholic. And when they did the exam at Mayo Clinic, all the tumors and the lumps and the masses that had been in the x-ray film, they were gone. And my parents, we lived in Missouri at the time. They moved to Miami. My dad went to work on the thoroughbred tracks. And my mom was in the kitchen one day washing dishes, and she said she heard a voice. He said, "You asked to know the truth before you die." And she said, "I did." And he said, "I'm the way, the truth, and the life." And she went and found her Bible and found the verse. And through that, they ended up becoming Christians. They accepted Jesus into their lives. And the temperature in our home changed so much that I walked in the kitchen one day and said, "What happened to you all?" I was 8. And they told me, and I knelt in the kitchen floor and became a Christian. So my faith journey didn't start inside a church or with a sermon. It started with life change. And my family moved to Tennessee not too long after that. And it's where we grew up. And my parents had a little Bible study in their home for a dozen years. They welcomed people. We live in Murfreesboro. It's a small southern community 30 years ago. And they really welcomed people that fell through the cracks, people that weren't welcome in more traditional settings. And the church was really birthed out of that home Bible study. So when people say to me, small groups don't matter, I disagree. You know, everything that's here today really was birthed out of that small group. And
I want to hear more about your walk with the Lord and how I know you were 8 years old when you accepted Christ, and so. But tell me your story of faith.
Okay. Well, yeah, I told a little bit. My faith journey didn't begin in a church, so candidly, I didn't have a real high value of church. Most of my spiritual life was incubated in more parachurch places and outside the church and small groups. And so when my parents told me the church had begun, I was a little embarrassed for them. I was on my way to professional school, and I had a plan for my life, knew what I wanted to do, and ministry wasn't even remotely on the radar.
What were you going to do?
I wanted to go to med school.
Okay.
I'd grown up around medicine, helping my dad treat animals, so I loved the challenge of medicine. But I was a little tired of the animals, so I thought I was going to get the education, I might as well go to the human side. So I completed that and was on my way, and the Lord began to, I sensed He was giving me an invitation into ministry, but I didn't know what that looked like. You know, 30 years ago, ministers wore long black robes and vestments, and they always looked to me like they frowned all the time, and that didn't fit I knew I couldn't do that. And when I graduated from college, I went for a summer to the Philippines with a mission team. And while I was there, I understood that I could have a positive impact on people's lives, being who I was with my faith. And so I came back and agreed to come help with the church while I did some graduate education at Vanderbilt. And so I did whatever. I mowed grass and cleaned bathrooms and then preached when they needed that and whatever needed to be done. And so I kind of grew up with the church, in those early years. But it was that transition for me was difficult because I felt like I had a plan that I wanted, and I wanted God to bless my plan. I didn't want to be a pagan doctor. Mm-hmm. I was willing to be a godly doctor, but I knew the income I wanted and the social status I wanted. And I thought to serve the Lord meant I was giving all that up and walking away from that. So it took me a while to sort that out.
So when did you begin pastoring World Outreach?
Well, I came back in 1981 really as an associate. I just did whatever needed to be done. I was the only employee the church had, but my dad was still the pastor. He was doing it bivocationally. And in the late 1986, I went to Israel, to Hebrew University for a year. And when I came back from there, church had about 200 people in it, and it needed full-time leadership. So my dad and I kind of just changed our roles a little bit. And he stayed involved, but he'd maintained his vet practice that whole time. And so I kind of took point at the church. And so from a more primary leadership role, probably from the late 80s.
Late 80s?
Yeah, 87, 88, somewhere in there.
And when did God change the direction and you took over pastoring?
Well, I think what changed happened on the inside of me. Mm-hmm. When the church began, in my heart, the idea was to love God and love people. And everything else was a mystery. I didn't have any imagination of what that would look like. And so I loved God and loved people. And church was a success by most standards, but we were stuck. And so I began to ask God to help me understand how to be effective or to give me a different assignment. Mm-hmm. And over a period, it wasn't one thing or one meeting, but God began to help me understand how church could be effective and make a difference in a community. And as I learned those lessons, I changed first, and out of that, the church changed.
Pastor Alan, thank you so much. It's such an honor to be with you in your beautiful, beautiful church, World Outreach.
Well, thank you, Terry. It's an honor to be with you today.
Are you wondering where God is taking you? I love His word in Psalm 139. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. And every single day of your life is ordained. So trust Him so that you can share your story of unshakable faith that will give Him honor and glory. This is today's life. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.